Hi, Alex. Thanks for being with me today.
Hi, Pascal. Thanks a lot for having me.
So tell me a little bit about Smythe. Who are you and what do you do?
So at Smythe, we're one of BC's largest independent accounting firms. We have about 230 people. Our core service offerings are accounting, tax, valuations, and M&A for private businesses in Vancouver or in the BC. So our client base really focuses, for the most part, on private businesses, owner-managed businesses, and the industries we serve are very reflective of BC. So it's in the BC landscape, there's construction, real estate, technology, distribution, services, manufacturing. So a lot of those traditional businesses plus technology are the core of our client base.
Okay, and what's your role at Smythe?
So at Smythe, I am the lead of our valuations and M&A group. So within our group, we have a team that does valuations work, and the valuations, a lot of it would be for business owners, usually ones that are thinking about some management planning. So a lot of the work we do would be about management succession, management buy-in. So businesses that are looking to bring in a new management team or some employee share ownership and want to have an idea of valuation, that's where our team would get involved. The other area that our valuations team does a lot of work is anytime there's disputes. So whether it's shareholder disputes or family disputes, they'll come in and act as the expert to provide a value as part of that assistance to settle the dispute. So that's our valuations team. And then on the M&A group, our focus is really on helping business owners understand what the value of their business is and how do they maximize value. So on the growth side of or business is going through a growth phase, that maximizing value could be looking at acquisitions. So it'd be helping a business owner who knows they want to grow and they've identified targets for growth or potential acquisition, helping them assess what the value of those acquisition targets are, helping them do due diligence on it, and helping them negotiate that deal. And on the other end of the spectrum, with business owners who are nearing the end of their career and are thinking about succession planning, we're helping them really understand what's the value of their business and then ultimately figuring out the best way that they can exit and maximize that value. So one of the ways that we can assist is by helping them ultimately sell their business.
So when you say disputes, do you have like mediators on your team that'll come in and
No,
solve that on the management team or?
no, so where we get involved on the dispute side is usually we'll be hired once it hits the legal stage. So we'll come in and we'll be hired by the lawyers to help put a value on what that dispute is.
Got it.
So very often our valuators will be expert witnesses assisting, helping provide evidence for the mediators or for the judges or for the lawyers on both sides to help them come to a settlement.
Okay, got it. And I would imagine when you do the succession planning, often there are disputes and families and things like that. I've certainly seen that. So,
On the succession planning side, although we don't have a formal training it, there is definitely a large part of psychology that can come into play there.
right. Yes, I've seen that. So when you're working with a business owner in the succession planning phase, what services specifically do you offer?
So the first thing we do is really helping them assess options. Because of the client base that we have, a lot of it is owner managed, a lot of it is family businesses. So for a lot of business owners, especially with a family business, they're usually their first goal is to keep it within the family. Or if there isn't family options, keeping it within their core management team.
Right.
So that's usually their first goal is to really help them assess what are the options they have. So it's either that internal piece, or if that internal piece isn't realistic, then it'd be looking elsewhere to see if it would be a third party sale is their option. So that's the first step, really understanding what their options are. The next step is performing a bit of a deep dive in their business. And the goal of that is really to assess value. So we what we try to do is really understand the business. We'll look at it from both the financial and operational perspective to say, okay, at this point in time, what is the value of your business? And if you want to sell this, or if you want to, or if you want to sell it, whether that sale is to a family member, to management, or to a third party, what's the value that, or what's the price that you would get now?
Yeah.
As part of that process, we'll also give the business owner recommendations or our ideas of why that value is what it is. And if they want to increase that value, what can they focus on? So at that point, a lot of times business owners have a little bit of a pause or reflection, and they can either say that value works, the timeline works, let's proceed with the plan. Or at that point, they can say, you know what, I want to wait. I want to see if I can make some of these changes in order to increase that value down the road. So that deep dive is usually the inflection point that a lot of business owners have really to understand what they want to do next.
Right.
Once they decide that they want to proceed, then our services will be usually split two different ways depending on the path they want to take. So if it's an internal succession plan where it's either family members or management team, will help structure the buyout. And to be honest, the internal succession usually is more complicated than a third party sale.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Because a big part of that is the team that, as part of that internal succession, they may not have the cash flow available to immediately buy out the business owner. So it's figuring out, okay, what's the structuring, what's the cash flow available, doing some modeling to help them, to help all the sides come to that agreement or that structure that works for everyone.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, as part of that, they will have to go get bank debt. So we'll be helping them put together forecasts or packages so that they can communicate to the bank what this is going to look like, so that they can ideally get the most financing they can, so that the business owner can walk away with as much money as he can up front.
Right. So that's probably the point where things get awkward at Christmas dinner
Yeah,
because mommy or daddy wants to sell it for a certain amount and then their children don't have enough. And
yeah.
then, yes, we go down that rabbit hole.
And with that as well, there's a lot of tax planning that can
Right.
happen there. So as part of, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm part of Smythe, which is an accounting firm. Um, we probably have one of the larger tax groups in BC from the independent firms as well. So from a tax planning standpoint, that's where my tax team gets involved. It helps figure out the tax structuring while I'm working on the business and financial structuring side of things.
And I think often that's neglected because that's often, the conversation I have. If you don't plan it properly and engage a tax team, you're going to leave, you're just going to be writing a bigger check to CRA and you're going to regret it. And you also kind enough to be on our panel when we had the two webinars, one about how to have a no regret exit. For those of you listening, if you have access to Elevate, we did that, had a good conversation there. And then we also spoke about why 80% of businesses fail. And often that's because you start planning too late. So that sort of leads into the question of when does a business start talking to you? So I think we said in that webinar, 3 to 5 years is a good benchmark, but remind me what you specifically said.
And I definitely agree. I think in an ideal situation, 3 to 5 years, but what I say is it's never too early.
Right.
So even if you think you're 10 years away from retirement or from what that exit date for you, it's never too early to start planning, because everything you do between now and the date you decide to exit is all work taking steps to build value in your business.
Right. And some of that can take time. If you
Exactly.
had Mark on one of those conversations, if you have to strengthen your brand, it's not something you do overnight, and all the
Yeah.
other different parameters that
E-
fall into
e- exactly. And it the earlier that you have the conversation, the earlier you think about it. It doesn't mean that you're spending days or weeks thinking about in depth, but it's just understand what the end goal is in mind,
that.
and
Mhm.
having someone to bounce ideas off of and objectively look at your business from purchaser's point of view to help you understand what are some of those areas that you can improve, or what are those things that purchaser would care about, whether or not that purchaser's a third party or an internal purchaser. What are those things that they care about, so that you can keep that in mind as you're making your business decisions 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road.
Yeah, it's very hard to take your emotions out of it when you're selling your home or your business. It's your baby. You put a lot of sweat equity, pain, sweat, and tears into it. So it can be hard to stay objective. So if a business owner already has an offer on the table, is that too late to come and see you and your team?
It's not too late. Usually it's not ideal, but it's never too late. What
Never
often
too early, never too late. Okay.
Never too early, never too late. Once the deal's inked, that's a different story. But when you're still negotiating, because a lot of times what will happen is business owners will get unsolicited offers.
Right.
So it'll either be an unsolicited offer from someone they've never heard of before, or it'll be someone that they've known over the years. It may be, whether it's a close business relationship or if it's just someone that they've known over the years. A lot of times business owners, they'll start these discussions, and the next thing you know it, they have an offer in front of them.
Right.
So in those situations, at a minimum, where we can help is we can help by taking a look at the business, understand the business, and just saying, does this offer seem fair or not? So it's giving a business owner that second set of eyes, that objective evaluation to say, does this deal make sense or not?
Mhm.
And the other place that we can help when you're having those negotiations is, if that offer is lower than they want, or if we think that offer isn't necessarily fair, it's how do you develop that negotiating strategy? How do you develop a bit of a process so that you can have leverage in the negotiations and get that up to where you want it to be?
Yeah, and I think that's a key point, because not everyone has the skill set to really negotiate well. So that's definitely a unique skill. What would you say are the other the benefits of hiring M&A advisor?
So where we add our value is really helping our business owner clients maximize their value. So we do it through a few different ways, but the most obvious is the process we run to help find a buyer and to help put the deals together.
Mhm.
So typically we would run a competitive process with multiple potential purchasers that are looking at that business. And that competition ensures that the business owner knows that the offers they're receiving are the best ones out there. Because the purchasers know that in order to win the deal, they have to put their best foot forward. They can't just throw in a low ball and expect to get the deal.
All right.
So kind of going back to your previous question about, is it too late if there's an offer on the table? A lot of situations we get involved in are situations where the business owner already knows who they want to do the deal with. So it could be a process of one.
Right.
So we may not have multiple purchasers looking at, but still putting structure around the negotiations so that our client who's selling can still maximize their value and not leave money on the table through a lowball offer. Like there's one deal in particular we worked on a few years ago where the final sale price that they received was about 50% higher than
Oh, wow.
what the original offer was. And that really was about making sure that there was a process and a timeline and a structure around the negotiations. It was a situation where there's an ideal purchaser that the business owner wants to negotiate with directly and give them a first shot. But the timeline structure we put around it was such that they knew that if they didn't come to the table with a strong offer, we would have talked to other parties. So
Right.
so they were willing to put a good offer forward because they wanted to preempt having to compete against other parties.
Oh, that's smart. And I would imagine too, if someone has an offer on the table, because I know you guys do really a deep dive in the due diligence and doing your research and all that, which is incredibly important. So has there been a scenario in which someone has an offer on the table, they're excited about the offer, you do your research and go, no, wait a minute, look what we found on this buyer, you might want to reconsider? Is that a scenario that you see?
Knock on wood, we haven't had that one happen yet.
Okay.
And the reason why, luckily enough, the reason when in the situations where we have dealt with businesses who have received those offers and have had discussions, in those situations in the past, they have been ones where the seller, so our client, has had a pretty good relationship with the purchaser in the first place.
Oh, so they know them well, so it's not, they
They
don't uncover.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, but it definitely happens, especially these days with a lot of private equity money and search funds out. There's a lot of search funds and private equity funds who are cold calling businesses looking to see if they're looking to sell. So I do know a lot of business owners are getting those calls on a regular basis. And that you raise a good point is really understanding who is it giving those offers, and are they credible offers, and are they credible people that or are they credible purchasers that the business owner wants to do business with?
And where is that money coming from?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And and I guess the other piece in terms of benefits of how we help maximize value is really allowing the business owner to focus on what they do best, which is running their business.
Yeah.
Like even the most simple, straightforward sales process takes hundreds of hours.
Right.
If you get a really complicated one, you're pushing 1,000 hours. So it's a lot of time and a lot of distraction for if the business owner is trying to do this on their own.
Yeah.
And what we've seen happen in the past is the worst thing that can happen is a business owner takes his or her eye off the operations.
And then something happens, now it's worth less.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you take the eye off the operations, you have an offer in place, but through that due diligence period, the results suffer. And all of a sudden the purchaser says, wait a minute, things are going downhill. I don't want to buy this anymore.
Yeah.
So when we talk about value maximization as the process is ongoing, it really is the business owner has to focus on making sure the business keeps operating either at or greater than what those projections or what those targets are, so that the purchaser has confidence that they still want to do this deal.
Yeah. Can't take your eye off the ball.
Exactly.
So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen?
I'd say they all generally revolve around something to do with lack of preparation.
Right.
Um, I'd say that the first bucket I'll throw in there is the owners themselves. And that usually has to do, a lot of times that has to do with the emotions involved in
Right.
the business. And I think you mentioned it earlier, the sense that for a business owner, this is their baby. They've been spending 10, 20, 30, 40 years building this, and the business is the identity. And for a lot of business owners, they're entrepreneurs for a reason, and it's because they like having control, they like being in charge.
Yeah.
And it's tough to make that emotional switch to say, I'm ready to turn this over to someone else.
Yeah.
And what that means is a lot of times business owners haven't taken the time to prepare that transition plan. So the business is still dependent on them. And even in family businesses, I have a situation now where it's a longtime client who the client's in his 90s,
Oh,
and
wow.
he's still not convinced that his sons who are in their 50s and 60s are ready to take over.
Oh my goodness.
So if that business is so dependent on the business owner, it's really tough to maximize value, because once that business owner retires or steps away, who's there to take over? It's never been tested. There's no plan of who's going to take over. There's no transition. Really, the business is all around that business owner. So if the business owner hasn't been able to prepare that transition plan and really prepare themselves emotionally,
Yeah.
it has a really big impact.
Well, it ties into what we say when we talk about retirement planning. You want to be retiring to something. So you have to imagine, what does your life look like when you're not working all the time? Like, what are you going to do that's going to be fulfilling? Just recently, I spoke to someone who retired and he got bored because he's that serial entrepreneur. He says, yeah, I retired for 64 days. I went on a cruise. I was so bored out of my mind. I was sketching ideas on my napkin. As soon as I got back home, I started another business. So yeah, if you don't plan on what you're going to do next that you can be excited about, it's just you're just be hanging on, right, to your identity and what you've been doing so long. So
And I'd say the other bucket, and again, it goes back to preparation, is the other bucket of mistakes is either the business owner not getting advice on what type of improvements that they should make, or not listening to that advice.
right.
And again, this goes to that emotional readiness to let go, because at the end of the day, that the value of the business isn't what the business owner believes. It's what that purchaser, again, whether it's family succession, whether it's management succession, or a third party sale, the value really is what that purchaser believes it is. So it's really being able to make that emotional detachment from what you've done as a business owner to build this business, to flip around saying, okay, emotionally detached, put yourselves in the shoes of the purchaser and really understand how they're going to perceive the business and how they're going to observe it. And
Right.
that's where having that outsider advisor to give some of that objective advice can be really helpful.
So do you see sort of a difference in like a generational mindset? And what I mean by that, if you're talking to a younger business owner, certainly the ones I've met, they're very clear as they start their business. I'm gonna, ramp up sales. I want to sell in 5 to 10 years. I know what it's going to be. And so they have their exit plan already. And so their identity isn't tied up in so much as, this is my lifelong plan. I plan to have maybe 2 or 3, 4 businesses. So do you see that difference? Like older business owners that maybe are more set in their ways and they've been doing it for a long time versus younger business owners?
I'm not necessarily sure it's demographics causing that, but it
Okay.
may be a bit of self-selection, because the business owners who have decided that this is their one baby for the rest of their life, they are the ones that are in their 60s or 70s as business owners, because they've still had the business and they had decided that that was going to be the business that they built and grew for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Whereas, so I'd say it's definitely a generalization, but the business owners in that demographic have self-selected that they are the ones that think that way. Whereas in the younger demographic, you probably still have that mix. You probably still have a large number of entrepreneurs that, no, this is what I'm going to build, and I'm going to be at this business for the next 30 years. But
Okay.
you'll also have the ones that
So it's a mixed bag,
will change
essentially.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. Okay. Okay. Just curious. So that's really good insight. Thank you, Alex. So to finish off, I'm just going to ask you a very random question that I
Sure.
ask all my guests and has nothing to do with the M&A world. And that question is, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, famous or infamous, who would that person be and why?
That's a tough question.
I hear that a lot. Yeah. And it could be more than one person. So whatever first comes to mind.
You know what? I'm a huge baseball fan. I've spent my entire life playing baseball. And when I was a kid growing up, it was during the Blue Jays World Series runs back in the early 90s. So if you're going to give me the option of having it with multiple people, I'd say it'd be dinner with one of the two Blue Jays World Series winning teams back in the
Okay,
90s.
okay. Well, that's good. I haven't heard that one before. So I like the question because it gives me a little bit of insight to people I know, and then I feel I know them better. So yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Alex. It's a pleasure as always. And to those of you listening, thanks for listening. And follow us on YouTube. Check out Elevate. and hopefully you'll be listening more into the future. Bye for now.
Thank you very much, Pascal.